If you check out the latest patch notes, then you might encounter a line that seems rather suspicious. The artist's Easter egg is easier to uncover. What is the meaning behind this? I just couldn't let this one slide, especially after getting called out in the patch rundown to figure out the truth behind it.
Your move, leduck.
What I found was both amazing and hilarious. So let's take a closer look at what the unique artist trait from Hwei is hiding. But before we get started, these types of videos are a ton of work, and subscribing to this channel helps me a lot to continue making them. With this out of the way, let's make Hwei for Hwei. He is one of the legendaries in set 11 and has a unique trait called Artist. Activating the trait makes the middle slot of your unit bench glow green, and it allows you to create free copies of your units. The core concept of this mechanic is very simple. You can copy a tier 1 unit every round. For tier 2 units you need 2 stacks, and every consecutive tier needs 1 stack more. If you want to create a copy of a legendary unit, then you need to farm up a total of 5 stacks. You only generate a new stack at the start of every round after you faced a player in combat. This means you don't receive a stack after defeating the PvE round. The stacks you generate can be transferred. This means you can initially put a lower tier unit on the bench slot and replace it with a higher tier unit later on, or you can even keep the slot empty at 4 stacks until you find the legendary unit you are looking for. Keep in mind, once you create a copy, all of your stacks will be consumed. For example, if you have 4 stacks and you place a tier 3 unit on the special bench slot, then you receive a copy of that tier 3 unit at the start of the next round, and the stacks are reset to 0. Also, it is not possible to change the unit on the hex at the start of the round. It doesn't matter if you swap or sell the unit, the mechanic will trigger at the start of the planning phase and you receive a copy if you gathered enough stacks. If you feel risky, you can intentionally fill up your first 4 bench slots, so the unit you pick up in the carousel lands on the special bench slot and then gets copied right away after the carousel. This can look extremely cool if it works out, but there is a good chance it goes horribly wrong. Before we get to the Easter eggs, there is one more mechanic that I want to go over briefly because it is relevant to this topic. During the PvE cycle, it actually made a difference if you upgraded Hwei to 2-star or 3-star. Back then, a 2-star Hwei would require 1 stack less for an upgrade, and a 3-star Hwei would simply upgrade the unit to 3-star at the start of the round. This mechanic was removed when the set went live, and I don't know if it will ever return. Currently, for the artist trait, it does not make a difference if you run more than 1 Hwei or upgrade him to 2-star or 3-star. This finally covers all of the base mechanics. Now we can start the hunt. Mortdog was nice enough to give us a starting point. He explained that if you move an item anvil on the special bench slot and you reach 10 stacks, you would receive a copy of that item anvil. But this clip is a bit older, and the patch notes did mention the Easter egg is now easier to uncover. There are a surprisingly high amount of non-units that can appear on the bench, and I'm afraid this will require a lot of testing just to make sure. Number 1, the component anvil. You can get this consumable from augments, encounters, or late game PvE rounds. Selling it gives you a selection of 4 components. By the way, this consumable has a pretty cool trick. You can sell the component anvil right before you warp to the carousel, and then you can make the selection during the carousel based on which component you want. But this video is not about min-maxing. You want to know if you can copy the anvil and how many stacks it takes. The answer is yes, you can copy the anvil, and it requires a total of 7 stacks. Is this ever worth going for? Probably not. 7 rounds is a long time, and there's a pretty good chance you prefer a copy of a legendary unit in the late game. Number 2, the item anvil. This is the big brother of the component anvil. Selling it gives you a selection of 5 different completed items. Can you copy this one as well?
Yes.
And it also only requires 7 stacks. You could make the argument it is a bit weird that there's no difference in required stacks between a small and a large item anvil, but to be fair, you do put yourself at quite a disadvantage not playing with a full item for 7 rounds. So I guess it's only fair that it works this way. At this point, you might have noticed that initially you needed 10 stacks for a copy, and both of them only required 7 stacks so far. This is what Riot was hinting at in the patch notes, but we are still far from done. Number 3, the support anvil. This one gives you a selection of 4 different support items, but be careful what you wish for. If you want to play a ZZ Rod comp, you will never see another bug in your life, and if you want to be clever with Zephyr strats, then you will have to open more anvils than eggs to get a chibi in the treasure realm. Usually you will get a support anvil from either a starting portal or the augment Fine Vintage, and I can confirm that you can copy this one with 7 stacks as well. Number 4, the artifact anvil. I'll make this one short since effectively it is more or less the same as the support anvil. You can copy this one for an extra artifact and it takes 7 stacks just like all the other anvils before. Number 5, Tome of Traits. Now it's starting to become a bit more juicy. Getting a Tome of Traits is honestly kind of hard ever since the Augment Ancient Archives was removed. Your best bet is usually a 30 stack fortune cash out or simply the loot subscription portal, but there are other mechanics as well, like prismatic orbs from PvE rounds or the Radiant Blessing. It appears that Hwei is not only a blacksmith but also a book printer, because after 7 rounds you will in fact receive a second Tome of Traits. This one is honestly quite useful. The chase rates in set 11 are extremely powerful, and a lot of times a single emblem won't have that much of an impact in the late game. However, if you manage to get the same emblem twice from your tomes, then you can potentially reach a chase rate like 10 Story Weaver. While the Tome of Traits is a rare outcome, this might be a strategy worth aiming for. Number 6, the Golden Egg. Okay, this one is arguably one of the most awesome and cruel things Riot has ever put into the game. Yes, you can copy the Golden Egg, but this is truly a race against time. You get the egg from a stage 4-2 augment, which likely means you are running around with level 8 and finding a way with only a 3% chance for legendaries is effectively dumb luck. I got scammed. But your problems don't stop here. The egg copies after 7 stacks, but you need to reach this amount before the egg hatches. You can make the argument that this is easy, because if you simply lose every round, you have more than enough time, but in reality, you can't afford to take this many losses this late into the game. The strategy I would recommend is the following. If you have a portal like Ascending Augments or Prismatic Party, you know that the stage 4 augment is prismatic. If you happen to find Hwei early, maybe because you got lucky with level 7 or level 8, you can already start gathering stacks early on. Now if the egg shows up in stage 4 too, you might already have a few stacks, which allows you to win a few fights and still get your hands on a second egg. Now it's a bit hard for me to tell how many stacks the egg has. For me it had 0 stacks and hatched in the next round, but I'm not even sure if this is fully intended, and maybe the egg is simply supposed to have the same rounds left as your real one. Anyways, this is definitely a super fun challenge to aim for. Maybe if I feel especially cruel, I'll add it as a bingo challenge in the future. I do have to admit that this has been a fun Easter egg so far, and I love it if developers add these types of fun but somewhat useless mechanics into the game. But there is one more thing that has been bugging me. I started this hunt because Mortdog effectively created an expectation by calling me out in a patch rundown, but it wouldn't be a leduck video if I just listed all of the intended interactions. I think it's time to break this mechanic. Number 7, the Exalted Orb. Okay, this is a weird one. If you activate the Exalted trait, then you receive an orb on your bench that you can sell for bonus XP. To my surprise, you can actually copy an Exalted Orb. To my disappointment, the second orb doesn't appear to do anything. It doesn't copy the XP values, and it also doesn't generate any new XP after a round is over. It is effectively useless and sells for 0 XP. But I didn't give up hope, because I thought maybe there's an oversight that I can abuse. In the past, it was possible to upgrade a Tome of Traits to 2-star. Maybe the same mechanic could work here as well. So I ended up copying a total of 3 Exalted Orbs, and it did nothing. My day was ruined. Or was it? Number 8. Copying Kale. This is a fun story. As you might know, I'm a fan of bugs in TFT. I saw some reports from players complaining about their Kale moving to the unit bench or just disappearing altogether. I had this interaction in the back of my head, but it was only when doing the Easter egg hunt that I decided to look more into it. I'll spare you the process on how I got here. This is how you copy Kale. First, you need to fill up your entire unit bench. Second, you need a Story Weaver emblem. Third, you need to run 4 or 6 Story Weaver units on your board. Finally, you select a random unit in a carousel, which automatically gets placed on your board because your unit bench is full. This unit now has a red marking indicating that it will get sold once the planning phase is over. Before you reach this state, you want to make sure that your Kale is positioned in the bottom left corner before the carousel. Put the Story Weaver emblem on any unit so the trait updates and Kale gets a new star level. The game is now confused and considers Kale as a new unit. If you sell any unit on your bench, Kale now gets automatically placed on your bench. In case you're curious, you can also decide to wait and just sell her. You won't receive any gold for Kale, and you can get her back if you reactivate the trait. But be careful, if you bench your Kale and then make any changes to the Storyweaver trait, then Kale will disappear and be gone for the rest of the game. But this is not what we want. Instead, we want to add Hwei and try to copy this Kale on our bench. We can't really interact with Kale, which is why it's necessary to sell the unit in the middle of your bench. As it turns out, after 7 stacks, not only can you copy item anvils, golden eggs and exalted orbs, you can also get your hands on a second Kale. Unfortunately, these Kales are considered units and not summons, and they will take up a slot on your board, so if you want to play them, you will have to sell some of your units on the board, so they move in automatically when the planning phase is over. Sadly, it doesn't look like the second Kale can be upgraded by any means, so yeah, she is effectively useless. Maybe someone else figures out how to create a second Kale with items, but I'm gonna throw the towel here. I invested way too much time into this mechanic already. There is nothing else to say except your turn, Mortdog. I hope you learned something, and see you next time.